In today's video, we will take our trains and move them to the track and then animate it so that the trains will go around the track. To start with, you've probably noticed that things get a little bit hard to zoom and focus on things when they're really small. And part of what we'll be doing is looking really closely at the train on the tracks, and it's a little hard to zoom in sometimes. To make that easier, we're going to set up the camera so that it's attached to the train, and then we can go into camera view really quickly and then work with the train that way. So let's start by hitting Shift A and camera, and we have a camera in our scene. Move in so that you're looking kind of at the side, a little bit to the back of your train. And we're going to use a shortcut to move the camera to this view. So Control Alt number pad 0 will move the camera to the view that we just had. If you want it a little closer or farther away, you can select the outline of the camera so you can see that this is highlighted. Hit G to grab, the letter Z 2 times, and then as you move your mouse, you can zoom in or out. So I'm going to get a little closer, then hit G, and then I can go up, down, left, or right, and center my train. Now that we have the camera in the position that we want, we're going to parent the camera to the train. So make sure the camera is selected first. Shift select the train body, then hit Control P and select Object. Now, when I move the train, the camera stays with it. If I orbit, I leave camera view. So if you ever accidentally leave camera view, 0 on the number pad will bring you back to looking at what the camera sees. So let's select the train and go over to the properties panel. And we're going to use a new category of items here in the property panel, the constraint tab. So select this tab, looks like a little gear and a little pulley and a large pulley and a rope going around them. We're going to click on add constraint and we're going to click follow path. We want it to follow our track path and we're going to select that. Now you'll notice that our train moved, but it's not on the track. The reason, if we open up the property shelf by hitting N, we can see the X, Y, and Z location are not 0. So what Blender tries to do is to put the train on the track and then it moves it away from the track based on these numbers. So we need to change all of these to 0 and that will put our train here at the track. You'll notice, excuse me, it's kind of sunk in the ground, so we can fix that by changing the Z location. And if I left click and drag, I can just go up and down with this number. But you'll notice that it's really hard because it's making very large jumps in how much it's moving. If you hold shift while you move that, it's going to make it move in smaller amounts. So I'm just going to move this up until it looks like it's right above the track. And I did something wrong. Let's just change that to 0. Left click and drag and then let go. There we go. I just didn't confirm that. So, and if it's still in there a little bit, I can look at this. It's 0.044. Maybe make it 0.045. Maybe 0.055. So you can play with this and get it lined up the way that you want it to be. Next, let's look at the settings of our follow path constraint. First thing we want to do is enable a couple of these check boxes. We're going to use a fixed position to tell Blender where it's at on the track. And we're going to click follow curve, so that way the train faces always curves and changes the way it's angled based on the track. You'll notice that when I did that, the train is now sideways. Blender doesn't know which way we want to be the front. So typically, depending on how you modeled your train, it should be X or negative X. So if I look at this offset factor, and yours will be gray. You notice that mine wasn't, so I had to fix that because I was working through this video earlier and I had keyframes on it. So I'm going to try negative X. I'm going to hover my mouse over the offset factor. I'm going to hold shift, that way it will move in smaller increments, and I'm just going to drag this to the left and make sure that my train goes forward instead of backwards. Well, let's try this again. It's kind of hard to tell, isn't it? Let's do this if I can. Well, sometimes it looks like it's going both ways because you go so fast. All right, so this, yes, X is backwards for me. Negative X is forwards. So if you notice you did it backwards, you can come back and switch these at any point in time. Okay, so let's talk about the offset factor. So I'm going to zoom out so I can see my train. And it's kind of small, but I can see it on the track. And the offset will move this around. And when you get to 1, you're at the beginning. So this number is either 0% of the distance of the track all the way up to 1, which is all of the distance of the track. It's a little easier to think of this as a percentage. So this is 0%, 1 is 100%, 0.5 is 50%. So that would put it halfway around your track. What we want to do is decide how long we want the animation. So let's look here at the timeline, and yours is probably condensed. So if you want to drag that up a little bit, you can do that. We're going to start at 1, and I think your default is 250. Let's change that to 3,000. Now, depending on the size of your track and your scale, this number may not work, but we're going to all do 3,000 right now. And once we set everything up, I will show you how to adjust it so that you have a speed that you like. But for now, we have 3,000. Let's change our current frame, which is this first number, to 1. And what we want on frame 1, we want our train offset to be 0. So it's at the beginning, or 0% of the distance of our track. So make sure your offset value is 0. Make sure you're on frame 1. Hover over the offset value, press I, and that will turn this yellowish color. So now there is a keyframe, which if we look at our timeline, let me zoom out a bit, should be showing up under 1. Let's see what I've done here. Well, it's there. I don't know why it's not showing up, but it's there. Oh, there we go. I had zoomed down. Yes, so you should see this little diamond shape indicating there is a keyframe on this spot with the offset at 0. Next, we're going to go to our current frame, change that to 3,000. Come back to the offset, change that to 1. Hover over it, press I to insert a keyframe. So if I zoom out, I have a keyframe at the beginning and I have a keyframe at the end. So if I hit play, my train is going to slowly start moving. I can hit 0 on the number pad to come look at my train. And you'll notice that it starts really slow and then it begins to speed up. So my advice is to watch through this. I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit to around halfway. And I'm looking at how fast my train is moving. So if your train is moving too fast, you want it to take longer. You want it to take more frames for the train to get from the start to finish. So if you're in a situation that you want to slow it down, I'm going to increase my end frame to say 4,000. I'm going to come to the timeline and left click on this little diamond, not the first one, but the second one. Make sure the first one isn't selected. This should be the only one that's a yellowish color. Hit G to grab, and I can move this back to around 4,000. So I'll zoom in using the mouse wheel to try to get this right on 4,000. So by doing that, I'm now going to slow down the speed of the train. If you want your train to be going faster, you can move this to a number before 3,000. So let's say that I move it to around 2,000, then hit play, and it will be going faster than it was at 3,000. Or if I move it over to here around 1,000, it's going to be going a lot faster. So depending on the size of your track and the scale, you can play with this until you get a speed that you're happy with. I'm just going to leave mine at 4,000 for now. That seems to be a pretty good speed. Okay, so we have our first train on the track moving. Let's go ahead and move the other train cars into position behind this. Let's start by going to frame 1. And instead of trying to go over and find the trains, I'm going to look at the list here in the outliner, and I'm going to select train car 1. And I had a constraint on it earlier when I was practicing. So select train car 1, look at the constraint tab, click add object constraint, go to follow path. Now you won't see it because it's offset from the track based on these numbers. So we're going to change X to 0, Y to 0, and Z to 0. And you should, in theory, see the train car, but you're not, because I forgot to tell you to pick the path that the train car was going to be attached to. So where the target is, select train path, and now you can see that car directly below your first one. Now, to keep them the same distance off the track, select your first train car, look at the Z value, and I'm just going to highlight the number. Make sure you don't get the letter M. Use Control C to copy, and it didn't show up with my shortcuts for some reason. Now I'm going to select the other train car, hover over Z, press Control V to paste, and now they're both sitting at the same location. Next, we're going to fix it so this other car is behind that. But let's start by changing our forward axis. I think I used -X. Let me see. Yes. So mine was -X. If yours was X or Y or something else, you'll need to use the same thing. We're going to use fixed position. We're going to use follow curve. And right now, they're both starting at the same point on the track, the 0%. I want this to be offset from that a little bit. And let me clear the keyframes. I meant to do that before I recorded. So we need to be negative or going back on this track. So I'm going to put -0.01 and hit enter. And that was way too far off. Let's go -0.001, and that's too close. And this is really trial and error. So -0.0011. No, 1, 2. So you can see that you'll just type in a little bit at a time until you find the number that works. Let me go a little bit more. So let's go to 2. So what I'm looking for is these curve pieces to be as close as I can without actually touching. So let's go add a 5 there. And I think that's probably, oh, see, that's what happens when I try to not use the camera. I feel like that's probably close enough for what I want. Now, this number is important, and I want you to write that down somewhere. So get a piece of paper, write down your number. I'm going to actually show you a trick if you ever need to make notes in Blender. I'm going to, oh, sorry, move this over a little bit, and I'm going to make a new little area. So I want to keep the outliner. I want to keep the properties panel. So I'm going to click right here in the corner, or move my mouse, I should say. And you see this little crosshair pop up. Left click and drag down, and you will create a new section. I want to change what this, not section, window or editor as they're called in Blender. I want to change this editor by clicking this button, and I want to change it to the text editor. Now I can make notes. First I have to hit new to make a new one, and I'm looking at this number, so I'm just going to highlight, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And that way, if I need to make notes or document numbers I need to remember, I can type it there. So we have the train. car directly behind our train engine. On frame 1, we want this train car to start at this point, so we're going to insert a keyframe for that. All right, my end frame is now 4,000. Yours may be something different, and the bell just rung, so I'm going to pause this. Actually, I'll stop this video, and we'll continue this in the next video.